So, as my last video was on the Magic in Darkest in the Light, my supernatural thriller novel, I wanted to dedicate this video to the Wight Wyrm Chronicles and sort of a discussion, I suppose, on how I make use of myth and magic in the fantasy world of Adref. Because I did do quite a lot of research into real world practices, but I also took some time to try and make Adref feel a bit more fantastical and outlandish, a bit more like it's its own thing a little bit. And with each book, the use of magic gets more and more complex and dreamlike and alien in a lot of ways. And to get one thing out of the way first, I did take a lot of inspiration from real world magical practices. As always, that's sort of a trend with me. Is I'm very obsessed with history, and as a result, I have called upon a lot of different rituals and practices from the real world. Especially, you'll see that like in the far north. You know, the Scaldlings are a northern animist, very pagan religion, and of course they're very Norse coded as a result. And the Wildrani, they are a very kind of medieval England culture, I suppose, and their magic is therefore a bit more complicated, a bit more religious in nature. You've got the magisters of the faith, right? They are worshippers of the sun and moon, these powerful deities, which sort of run a somewhat dualist religion, I suppose. The sun and the moon actually they're not opposing forces, but they are like the two faces of a one god of good in a way. Very a bit different in flavor from just like old, like medieval Christianity, but not dissimilar from it either, right? Because the magisters, right, they're very indirectly very powerful individuals, right? And certainly they have a dark Catholic flair to them. Um, but they also have a lot in common with like old school like Roman and Greek institutions. They're led by a grand imperator, and they have these armored battle clerics and ordinators, and they're very fiscally and financially intelligent. Which makes them very dangerous, of course, to like the nobles and that sort of ruling class. Um, and I think one thing that I definitely wanted to do with the Magisters in particular is I kind of wanted to lean into this idea that most of them, the vast majority of them, do believe in their twin gods. They're very well indoctrinated in that. It's not like your very classic, very nihilistic view of Christianity, where every priest and bishop or whatever in the Middle Ages was a corrupt psychopath. And so I wanted to kind of spin the Magisters in that very different way. They approach their religion very differently than like like every different magister has different ideas about how they want to approach their faith. But most of them, the vast majority of them, have seen the power of their gods firsthand. They are well in on the cult, shall we say. Um, and then there is Lord Mannion, who is also very religious, a follower of the sun and moon, right? But he is not a magister, he is an astrologer. He is the court stargazer, and he's just a very brilliant, knowledgeable character. I did take inspiration from guys like Merlin and real world guys like John Dee, um, in inspiration for Lord Mannion, and he's a very interesting character as he's so knowledgeable, but he's so set in his ways too. He's an outcast, but he's also a little bit of a prude, and he looks down on the earthen magic, the pagan ways of, well, his own people, his ancestors, right? It's something that comes up is that the Wildrani were a pagan a pagan witchcraft heavy people, only to be slowly converted to the faith of the sun and moon. And Lord Mannion, in turn, he does some of that very old school, solamnic, occult, mildly kabbalistic magical practices. He calls upon these great supernatural powers to show him the future and the past. He does a lot of scrying and crystal ball gazing. He does alchemy and parlor tricks in this very mathematical, intellectual form of magic, right? The calling upon the runes and the sigils and the magic circles. Um, and that style of magic, right? That very kind of hermetic, thelemic magic, a bit more modern, I suppose, in our line of thinking. Um, that magic is challenged by not just the northern pagan practices in Adref, right? The sorcerers and witches under the Ashwolf Esquarger, as those practices are more like black magic. They get pretty crazy up there. But you also have Lord Mannion's own old apprentice, not Devon, his current pupil, but Duncan Wolfsbane, the Duke of Lowkirk, who is a powerful folk magician, and he is all in on the disease and healing, the animal sacrifice, that druidic distant ancestors, pagan stuff. And even Duncan, he works that magic with a twist. Everyone does magic in their own way, their own weird way, and arguably probably the most like honest, straightforward, like low magic witchcraft that we get in the story is probably from the Witch of Elder's Grave, the sort of adopted sister of Audra Greenblade. But I digress. That's its own can of worms. Um, I merely just want to say here how there's that interesting dichotomy. There's a great dichotomy there, where these two kinds of magic are at war with each other. The intellectual, the modern, the ceremonial, very very complex magic, and then the folk magic, the magic of your ancestors, your people, right? They're kind of having a bit of a tug of war throughout the narrative, and eventually they are united by Askvarger, the villain, who brings them both together and abuses them for his own gain. And further on, we deal with more crazy concepts like the world soul and ancient alchemy, that sort of inner darkness and inner light, and life and power, the prima materia and the philosopher's stone, the elixir of life, and it's all united and worked upon by Askvarger the Ash Wolf, who has sort of mastered both the folk magic and the ceremonial magic and the alchemy and the necromancy, all in order to work upon these complicated alchemical ritualistic practices, this sort of quest for life everlasting, to see it all from all angles and ends, to see his great work through. So yeah, that's the magic of the Wight Wyrm Chronicles in a nutshell. If you want to know more, or to see how this magic is translated into my writing firsthand, you can always read the first book in the series, The Wolf at the Door, which is now available on Amazon. You can go ahead and look for the Wight Wyrm Chronicles by Connor Landon Freeman, and thanks again in advance. I really appreciate it. Um, Go ahead and like and subscribe while you're here. If while you're at it, it really helps the channel grow. And until next time, yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.